the first and second book of Kings, and I think maybe I'm reading through the Bible anyway, maybe I've read that 20 odd times before, but the book of Kings is so exciting. Really. And I came across this. A man of God went out of his way to a place in the vicinity of Sidon, and there he met with a woman who had a child, and he formed a rapport with this woman who had a desperate need, and the man of God was able to meet the desperate need of that woman, because that woman, it was for the woman's child, and Elijah did the stuff and then left. And then this week's reading in Matthew chapter 15 tells about a man of God who left what he was doing and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon, where he met with a woman who had a child in desperate need, and he formed a rapport with that woman and healed the woman's child and left. Isn't that strange? That 1,000 years before it happened in the life of Jesus, almost the same thing happened in the life of Elijah. And it just reminds us that God knows what's going to happen. And not only does he know what's going to happen, he decrees what is going to happen. It's called a foreshadowing. And it's just a great reminder that God is in charge. God is in charge in the Middle East. God is in charge of the Islamic State. God is in charge in Rotherham. God is in charge. And the foreshadowing, I think, is always a reminder that God is sovereign. Nothing ever happens in this world unless God has sanctioned it to happen. Our big problem is why, and he ain't telling us why. Anyway, this is Matthew chapter 15, which I think we've just been reading. Oh, my eyes. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman came from that vicinity, came to him crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession." Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs." "Yes, Lord," she said, "but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." And her daughter was healed from that very hour. You know, in this reading, the first thing is that Jesus leaves what he's doing. Actually, if you've been reading in Matthew, there was great stuff going on in the ministry of Jesus. He just fed 10,000 people with 5 bread buns and 2 sardines. He just walked on the water. He just had a discourse with the religious hotshots of the land and told them a few things they didn't know. Things were going great. And then God called him away. and he had to go right up there. Tyre and Sidon are like in what we would call the Lebanon today. 40 miles from where Jesus was operating, and in those days, with sandals and no bikes, no buses, you'd have to walk 40 miles. It would take them a couple of days at least, and then the same back. Jesus took a whole week out of a really powerful, successful ministry to go and see one woman. Now, sometimes, that reminded me that sometimes it happens that God calls someone away from a work which is really powerful and which is really going somewhere, and God calls them away, and there's a real temptation to think, what on earth is going to happen to all that stuff that I've been involved in if I'm not there? If I'm not there, what's going to happen? And if God calls us away, we have to go, but we have to know that it's God calling us. And I know some people in this church who were involved in something where God was working really powerfully, and for some reason God calls them away from that. And they have to know that it's God, and if it's God, they have to go and leave it. And God is quite able to take care of that which he calls us away from. I don't know whether any of you remember, some of you oldies will remember when the communists took over in China in 1949 or somewhere around there, and chucked out all the Christian missionaries. And they said, oh, what's going to happen to the poor Chinese church if we leave? But they had to leave because God sent them out. And they were out for 15 years, and when they went back in the 1960s and China began to open up again, they found out that God had been at work. And the 50 million Christians that they left behind when they went back in 1965 had multiplied to 300 million. Yeah? God called them away. Now this is what happened in the life of Jesus, because something really, really important needed to be seen to in the region of Tyre and Sidon with one single woman. What was so important? Well, he arrives there, and this woman comes along. It tells us in Luke's Gospel, I was just reading it yesterday, that that people in Tyre and Sidon, that area, it's where the Phoenicians were, if you know anything about that. They were horrible, but that's where they were. They had heard about what was happening in Israel with this, you know, this bloke from Nazareth who was doing amazing things and making amazing claims. They'd heard about it, and I reckon that this woman sort of knew something of what was going on. And when Jesus arrived here, she came to him with her own request. Now, she had a demon-possessed daughter, and that was the big thing in her life. But what I'm telling you about isn't about the daughter, it's about the woman. And she came and she said this, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. She said something else about the daughter, but it's those words. I don't know about you, but when I read the New Testament, somebody addresses Jesus as Lord, that tells me that they have already some faith. Paul says in the book of Romans, it's in chapter 10, verse, verse, I don't know, what is it? Verse 9, thank you. It's in verse 9 where it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. There's something about calling this man Lord. It signifies she believed something. She had a faith. Now, the second thing she said was, Son of David. Now, that's a kind of nickname. It's a code word. When people refer to the Son of David, what they're talking about is Messiah. Somehow, this woman who was a Gentile, not of the house of Israel at all, had heard that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, was the Jewish Messiah. Not her Messiah, because she wasn't of the house of Israel. Somehow she knew that. This woman is a serious woman. She knew stuff, and she had a belief, and she knew who Jesus was. But because she was out of the house of Israel, she came and said the rest of the thing she said, which was, "Have mercy on me." Now, when someone comes to Jesus and says, "Have mercy on me," what they are really saying, I have nothing to offer. I am totally, there is nothing. I have no virtue. I have no rights. There is nothing to commend me. And I throw myself entirely on your mercy. This woman knew something. Well, and I think actually we talked about this a little bit in the prayer meeting earlier, that the mercy of God is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Because we know what we deserve, don't we? And God withholds that from us. And that's his mercy. And she came and she said, "I know what I deserve. Lord, have mercy on me." Now the next thing that happened didn't. Because it says in the Bible that Jesus did not say a word. That sounds to me like he ignored her. But when Jesus doesn't answer, that's not the same as ignoring. He chose not to answer because he had a plan with this woman. Now, I don't know whether you've had this experience, but I've had it over and over again. Tell me about it. About where you pray for something and God doesn't answer. Is that familiar? Does that ring a bell? Oh. So what on earth is he up to? When he says, "Bring you, knock and the door will open, ask and it will be," no, all that stuff. If you ask anything, all that stuff. And you come and you ask for something and he remains silent. Jesus did not say a word. What's it all about? Well, it's happened to me many a time. It's happened to you as well. I remember on one occasion when I just told you about this turmoil in my family that's been going on for donkey's years. And I got so exasperated and so angry with this fella, I'll call him Fred. That's not his name, but I'll call him Fred. That I went out, I just didn't shake my fist at God. I said, "What are you playing?" And I took the dog for a walk and I went and raged about on the hills. And and it's almost as if God said to me, "You're not answering. And what you gonna?" And it's almost as though God said to me, it seemed very clear at the time, that God said, "I am using Fred as a hammer to beat you, John, into shape. And it's no concern of yours what I do with the hammer. Just trust me." And I think that's what was happening with this woman. He didn't answer her a word because what he was wanting her to do was to trust him more. To trust him more. Now, if this sermon has got a title, I would give it this title: Stretching Your Faith. Because Jesus is stretching this woman's faith. And he did it in the first place by not answering her request. So when God is silent to your request, don't think that he hasn't heard, and don't think that he is ignoring you. He's simply stretching your faith. Now, what happened next was that the clodhoppers, the disciples, came along, as they did, you know, big boots. "Send her away, send her away. She keeps on crying after us." And Jesus said a very strange thing. Seems strange, but actually it isn't. I've dwelled on this story for weeks. Honestly, I can suck the juice out of this. I could preach it. I could preach till Thursday on this. Maybe I will. It says, the disciples came and they said, send her away, we're sick of her, she's getting on our nerves. And Jesus said something, what's going on? Right. Jesus said this, I came only to the lost sheep of Israel. That's what he said. And that's a persistent message in the Bible, that God sent Messiah to the Jewish people. I came only to the lost sheep of Israel. That's what it says. And he wasn't her Messiah. And in a sense, as Gentiles, he isn't ours either. Now that's going to shock some people, but I'm quoting Jesus, who said, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. And we read in a previous chapter of Matthew's Gospel, I think it's chapter 12, where the leaders of the Jewish nation, on behalf of the nation, and that's the way it works, rejected Jesus as Messiah. And it just happens that after that rejection, Jesus operates not only according to whether people belong to the house of Israel or not, but he operates on the basis of personal faith. And I think that's one of the things that this story is about, and that's why it's so important. It says in John's Gospel in chapter 1, and I think it's verse 12, John says, he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to those who did receive him, he gave the right to be called children of God. And the house of Israel rejected their Messiah. And because of that, we are here. Now, I don't want to plug that very much, because I know it's controversial. But that's what Jesus said. I came only to the lost sheep of Israel. Now the woman would hear that. And that's why she said, have mercy. And that's why Jesus operated in this woman's life on the basis of personal faith, rather than the fact that she was not of the house of Israel. Okay, let's go on. He was stretching her faith. He was saying to her, trust me more. Trust me more. I'll just tell you a little story here. I've just thought of this. I'll tell you a little story about myself. Because this is a true, well, some of it's true and some of it's not true. And you decide, you'll have to decide which is which. I have a brother-in-law called Len, who's an American. He's been pestering me for years. John said, let's go to America, let's go to the States. So I said eventually, okay, well, let's go. And he organised a trip, and we went to, Len and I, we went to Arizona. I wanted to see the desert. Oh, the desert. Arizona. Oh. I only went, anyway, we went there, we did Arizona, and then Nevada and Utah. Utah is absolutely amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And anyway, we were staying in this place, a little town called Mesquite, which is just over the border into Nevada. And we were staying in this place, and there was a golf course, and my brother-in-law Len is keen on golf. I mean, he doesn't do anything else apart from golf. If you get treasure in heaven by playing golf, then, you know, Len's treasure chest is absolutely stuffed. But I don't. And he says, right, come on, John, I'm going to teach you how to play golf. So he went and got some sticks and some balls. And he said, now this is how you hold it, and you swing it like this, and you did. And he told me it's all about angles and forces. I understood that. And so he gave me the thing, the stick, the cue, what's it called? Club. He said, right, he taught me how to chip and how to putt and all this stuff. And, you know, in all modesty, I have to say that I was pretty good. I was pretty good. If I'd carried on, you know, Rory McWhat's name and Tiger thing, they'd have to just watch out. So he said, he told me all the stuff to do. He said, right, let's have a go. And we put the ball down. He said, you see that flag over there? He said, hit the ball over there. So I took a swipe at it. He went, bang, and it soared off into the distance. And we walked up to the thing where it's flat, called the green. And there was the hole, and the ball was that far away from the hole. So I said, well, what do I do now? He says, knock the ball in the hole. So I said, Len, why didn't you tell me that back there? The point is, I did really, really well, but that little bit was the important bit. And you know, you may have faith, you may have a load of faith, whatever that means. I don't know what this stuff is. I don't know whether you get it from the paper shop or Boots or what. You may have a load of faith, but that little bit is the bit that matters. And this is what Jesus is doing with this woman. He's stretching her faith. He's persuading her to trust him more. Just for that little bit that is the important bit. And I think that's a very common experience among Christians. I don't know whether that is true of you. But I like that man who came to Jesus once and said, Lord, I believe. Please help my unbelief. And that's the way I feel. Of course I believe. Of course I trust. But sometimes there's a little shortfall. And Jesus needs to stretch my faith by keeping quiet when I request something, so that I learn to trust him more and more. And that's the story of our life as believers. Now, it may be that there's somebody here, I don't know you all, I know a lot of you, but I don't know your hearts. It may be that there's somebody here who, yes, you do believe, but there's a shortfall. You know, and you need that last little bit to get the ball in the hole, to assure yourself of salvation. Lord, I believe. Please help my unbelief. And today may be an opportunity for you who believe 99%. To take that last step and trust in Jesus completely. Whether you're a believer or not. And there may be unbelievers here who've been coming to church for donkey's years. You've never actually taken that last important step that gets the ball in the hole. That's what this woman did. And Jesus is stretching her faith. She's you know, and she, after he said about the lost sheep of it, she came and she fell on her knees before him and she said, Lord, please help me. That's a really important prayer. I've been listening to John Wimber, who was the founder of the Vineyard movement. And some of you really ought to get to terms with what John Wimber said. But one of the things he said, that when he and his team are operating and ministering in the power of the Holy Spirit, the most common prayer that the ministry team make is this prayer: help. And I believe that God really hears that prayer, because it means that we have nothing. We entirely trust in him. And that's that last little bit. Lord, help me. And of course the woman's faith was stretched. And you know, if you read this and read it again, you'll see what Jesus is doing. He's pulling her a little bit further, stretching her faith. Now let me just deal with this thing about the dogs. Did you get that about the dogs? Yeah. Because the Jews thought of the Gentiles as dogs. And what they meant was that scruffy thing that raking about the neighbourhood that people shout at and throw stones at. That's the way the Jews regarded the Gentiles. It wasn't godly. God never said that, but that's what they did. They regarded the Gentiles as dogs. So, when Jesus effectively called this woman a dog, you might think he's insulting her, because it was an insult. But he wasn't, because Jesus does not insult people. So what was he doing? Well, he said to this woman, it isn't right that the children's bread should be given to their dogs. Notice that, their dogs. Because that little word tells us that it's not this scruffy mutt that roams about the streets that people throw stones at. This is a family pet that he's talking about. And dogs have always had a wonderful relationship with people, an absolutely unique relationship, where dogs have always hung about people, because by doing that they benefit from the household. They're not part of the family, but it's in their interests to be in the household, because, you know, you get this relationship between the family and the dog. And he's saying, Jesus said to the woman, it isn't right that the children's bread should be given to their dogs. And I think she caught on to what he was saying because of her response. Because she said, yes, Lord, but even the dogs get the crumbs that fall from their master's table. I'll tell you what I think's going on here, and I think this is really, really good. I think Jesus and this woman have got something going here. I think they're having a laugh together at the expense of the rest of the Jews who had this attitude towards Gentiles. I think that they are having a private joke. It's a little dialogue between the two of them. And they're like saying to one another, we know what they don't know. And sometimes when you read scripture, you just see the words on the paper, and it doesn't convey something else that's going on. And you can use a bit of inspired imagination over this. I think that when Jesus said that, it is not right that the children's bread should be given to their dogs, he's got a twinkle in his eye. He's got his tongue in his cheek. And she catches on. And the two of them are having a little joke together that the others don't understand. But also, Jesus is stretching her faith. And he says to her, it's not right. And she says, yes, Lord, but. There's that word again, Lord. Yes, Lord, but. And I think it's a great little occasion that. It just, to me anyway, it just shows a little bit of Jesus' sense of humour, but it's with a purpose. Now, after that happened, Jesus said, woman, your faith is very great. And she got her request met, because her daughter from that moment onwards was delivered from demon possession. And when she got home, there the little girl was sat and everything was fine. Do you get what I'm saying? Jesus is stretching her faith. And I think that he wants to stretch our faith too, to get us to believe, to get us to increase our faith. And that sounds a bit, religious, doesn't it? Because we don't know what faith is. We've all got it, but we don't know what it is. Just think of it like this. Jesus wants us to trust him more. Jesus wants us to trust him that last little bit. That in the case of a person who isn't yet part of the kingdom, that little bit secures salvation. And for those of us who do believe, that little bit of extra trusting him enables us in his power to do the stuff that we're here to do. And so, just to finish, a prayer. If you know this, you can say it with me. It's called the Gloria. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Glory to God.